What is the best way to have and raise children in the modern era, in the collapsing Western world, in the dark age in which we have entered as an alpha male, particularly an alpha male 2.0, as we talk about here at this channel? I will answer that question right now. The main thing is that you have to realize that this is no longer the 1950s. This is no longer the 1800s. And so we have long passed the era in which you could have children. They were inexpensive to raise, and your odds of raising them correctly were high because society actually cooperated with you raising high quality, happy, well-adjusted children. None of these things are accurate anymore. So you cannot follow the advice of traditional conservatives. You cannot follow the advice of Christian religion or Muslim religion. You cannot follow the advice of many red pill guys, many right-wingish guys who say, have all the kids you want, you should have children, a real man has kids, we need to save children to save the white race, or whatever other arguments you hear from these sources. Does that mean you shouldn't have kids? No, I have 2 kids. So it's perfectly fine, provided you do it in a very different way with a very different set of requirements. I will list off 5 aspects to this in terms of having kids the modern era. And some of these I've discussed before on other videos or blog posts. So if you're familiar with my content, you may have heard them. But if you want more detail on this, I have 2 entire chapters on how to raise children as an alpha male 2.0 in my primary book, The Unchained Man, at alphamalebook.com. And it's only $7. So if this is of real interest to you, you should get that book. All right, with that context, number 1, top of the list, you should only have kids if you want them badly. Now, let me be very specific about this. You should only have children if, on a scale from 1 to 10, your desire to have kids is an 8 or higher. I've said this before. And the reason I say that is because raising kids today is extraordinarily expensive and extraordinarily difficult. Matter of fact, it is perhaps the most difficult it has ever been, both financially and culturally, than it has ever been in modern human history. And it's getting worse. So unlike prior eras, prior to the collapse of the Western world and things of that nature, you could just have kids because your girlfriend wanted kids or your wife wanted kids or your mom and dad said you better have kids. You're like, oh, okay, you just had kids. Prior to the 2000s, people could pull that off. Today, no. And this is dangerous because I have spoken with many, many men, hundreds of men, about the topic of having children. And when I ask men of any age, 20s, 30s, 40s, it doesn't matter, on a scale from 1 to 10, how badly do you want to have kids? They go, is not an 8 or higher. An 8 or higher means, yes, I want kids. I can't wait to be a dad. I am so excited about having kids. I've been thinking about it for years. As soon as I get settled down, I am having kids because I'm so pumped to have children. That is an 8, a 9, or a 10. I don't know. Well, I haven't thought about it. Well, I don't really know. Well, I just haven't made that decision yet. These are not 8 out of 10. If that is your answer to whether or not you want children, then guess what? Do not have children. Only have children if you want them badly. And if you don't want them badly, don't fucking have any. You will ruin your life. Let me state something I've stated before, and I've shown statistics on this on my blogs. When people have children, their overall average level of happiness drops. It goes down. This is men and women both. This is even if they are together and married in a traditional household and they don't get divorced. Their average level of happiness drops and it stays low until the last kid moves out of their home, and then guess what? Their happiness goes back up again. So if you're going to incur that level of reduced happiness for 20 years or more if you have more kids, you better want kids really fucking bad. And if you don't, do not have kids. You'll be happier and your life will be better. That doesn't mean you'll be miserable if you have kids. I didn't say that, so don't misquote me. You heard what I said. You'll be less happy and it costs a lot of money in order to have children. Perfect segue to item number 2 on this list. And I've said this before as well. If you live in the Western world and you have made the decision to stay in the collapsing Western world for the indefinite long-term future, which I think is very stupid. I would not live in the collapsing Western world. I don't live in the Western world anymore. As I record this video, I'm in Paraguay and I live in Dubai. But okay, it's your life. If you're going to stay in the Western world for the indefinite future, do not have any kids, regardless of how badly you want them, unless you make a strong 6-figure income or you are a millionaire. And the reason I say that is this. We live in an era now where it is ultra expensive to raise kids. The last numbers I remember looking at is something like $400,000 or so to raise a kid. This is after taxes. You have to add taxes onto that. To raise a kid from age 0 to age 17, which means that doesn't even include things like college and the expenses of children after they move out of the home. Trust me on this. Kids don't suddenly stop costing money once they turn 18 or once they move out of the house. They still need help, especially these days with the Gen Z and millennial generations. And like I said, it's going to get worse as the Western world continues to collapse. You better not have any children unless you make a shitload of money. I'm talking about any children, including just one. Today in the Western world, having kids is the domain for rich people. And if you're not rich, then either you don't have kids or you move out of the Western world to the developing world where it's a lot cheaper. If you're going to move to Cambodia and stay there for the rest of your life and marry a Cambodian woman and raise kids in Cambodia, great. Have as many as you want. Raising kids over there is going to be really, really cheap. Same thing with here in Paraguay or Colombia or other places in Southeast Asia, places that are outside the West where cost of living is much, much, much cheaper. Then go ahead and have children. That's fine because it'll cost you a lot less money. Now, notice I said you're going to move out of the Western world and stay out of the Western world. Notice I did not say you go to Vietnam or you go to the Philippines, you meet a Filipino girl over there, you marry her, and then you bring her back to the West to have babies. No, I said you're moving out of the Western world and you're staying out of the Western world, which is what I did. Then fine, if you live in a low cost of living country, you can have kids without being high income or wealthy. Other than that, you are asking for trouble if you have kids in the Western world and you don't make at least $100,000 a year and or have a net worth of at least $1 million. I would not want to be you if you have kids today and you don't make that kind of money. Talk about a living hell. No thanks. Item number 3 on this list, have the least amount of children possible. This goes back to what I just said. The more children you have, the more time and effort it takes, and the more money it will cost you. Even if you can afford to have as many children as you want, have the least amount you can, because for every child, that takes more resources out of your life, more time out of your life, especially if you're one of these guys who doesn't have that 8 on a scale from 1 to 10. Now, I can hear the counter arguments. Well, Caleb, what if I travel around the world and impregnate a bunch of girls and they just have babies on their own? I am talking here about you having children that you actually raise yourself. If you're going to go around the world and impregnate women in developing countries where they don't have child support because you want to feel like some kind of alpha male from the Babylonian era, then I guess go ahead. That's not something I would do because that sounds pretty shitty to me. But hey, it's your life. I'm talking here about your kids that you actually take the time and effort to raise. If you have 5 children, boy, is that going to be a time suck out of your life. And again, I hope you already have a business that pays you a lot of money, as in millions of dollars. And if you don't have that, you're going to damage your mission, damage your goals, damage your ability to maintain your family when you have a lot of kids. I have given many examples of people I've seen. I know a couple back in the United States, young couple, religious couple, and they had 5 kids because their Christian religion told them to from the ages of 20 to 29, and then they got divorced. The guy's a delivery truck driver. Both these people, mom and dad, and all 5 of these children are completely fucked now because they had too many kids when they couldn't afford them because their religion said so and because their parents said so. You've got to take charge of your own life. If you want children that you're going to raise yourself, have the minimum number you can. 1 or 2, in my opinion, just my opinion, is probably best. 3 kids, my God. Talk about having no life. And you may say, well, my wife is going to take care of all that. Children need you. If you're going to raise your kids, be a dad and raise your kids. That's my thing about raising kids. If you're going to have kids that you're going to raise yourself, take the time to spend time with those kids. That's what I did when my kids were young. I spent time with my kids. I went out of my way to spend time with my kids. Both when I was married to their mother and after I was divorced from their mother, I took the time and effort every week to spend time with my kids. Am I saying I was a perfect dad? No, I wasn't, but I took the time. And if you're not willing to take the time, don't have any kids. And if you're willing to take the time, have the least number of kids possible, because my goodness, in this era, having 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, even if you can't afford them, just as a time management challenge and a suck on your goals and your mission and your ability to support that family, don't do it. Minimum number of kids possible. Step number 4, when you raise your kids, you have 2 objectives. Objective number 1, that I'll talk about in step number 4, and I'll talk about the second step in number 5, is you need to teach them cause and effect. That is your role, or one of your 2 roles, as a father in the modern era. Children today, unfortunately, in the last 15, 20 years or so, are not taught cause and effect. Teaching children cause and effect today is considered mean and rude and not being nice to your kids. Cause and effect means when they do bad things on purpose, something bad happens to them. We used to call it punishment, and that can be anything from sending them to their room to a timeout, which is what I use with my kids, which worked very, very, very well. Don't physically hit your kids, please. That's insanity. But you get my point. Today, it is considered uncool, it is considered mean, it is considered barbaric to actually punish your kids. I'm not talking about hitting your kids, giving them a timeout and things like that. For example, I'll give you an example on this. My parents' generation, if you were bad, you got something called the belt. And so your dad would take off his belt and hit you with his belt. Now, yes, there's some parts of the Western world, and certainly outside the Western world, where that's still the case. But generally speaking, in civilized societies, that's not the case anymore. That was a long time ago. Then it went from the belt to send your kids to their room. That's the era in which I grew up. I'm Generation X. So when I was bad when I was a kid, I got sent to my room. And the problem with that is I loved going to my room. I was an introvert. I loved reading books. And so when my parents said, go to your room, I said, cool, okay. And I'd go to my room. Matter of fact, there was one instance when I was little, me and my 2 sisters were all in the same age range. We were all running around being maniacs, and my dad got pissed off and he said, all right, all 3 of you go to your room. And he was all mad. And both my sisters, who are extroverts, said, no, I don't want to go to my room. They started screaming at my dad. Ah. And I said, cool. I ran to my room, jumped in my bed, and read The Hobbit. So sending kids to their room, not the ideal effectiveness. Then it was, when my kids were little, the timeout, where you sit them in a chair and you point them in a corner of a room and you set a timer, and the timer is for 1 minute for every age the child is. So if they're 4 years old, you set it for 4 minutes. They can't make any noise. When the timer goes off, they can get off the chair. Very effective way to train kids on cause and effect. It worked wonders for my kids. It was very, very effective, worked very well. Then a little bit after that, you started having books and things saying the dangers of the timeout. Timeout is bad and abusive to children. It is. Today, especially single moms, don't punish at all. They just scream and yell at their kids and threaten and never actually punish them, never give them a timeout, never take their PlayStation away. They just don't punish anymore. And you see the results now in society, starting with the millennial generation, now with the Gen Z. We now have 2 generations of kids that were barely punished, if punished at all. And you see what kind of problems that causes. And so you don't want to be a cause of that problem. You want to teach your kids cause and effect. I will give you an example of the effectiveness of this. Back when I was married in my first marriage and my kids were little, in my traditional monogamous marriage to my first wife, my kids would be little and they'd be running around the house, it'd be bedtime, and so my wife at the time would chase them around the house saying, you gotta go to bed, go to your room, you gotta get to bed. And they go, ha, 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 and they would just run around the house and completely ignore her and give her all kinds of hell, and she would scream and she would yell and she would threaten and she'd get pissed off, and she would spend a half an hour trying to get these kids to go to bed. And it wouldn't work. Big shock, because she didn't train them cause and effect in terms of their interactivity with her. So what she would do is she would walk into my home office. I had a little home office back then in our house. And she would say, can you please help me send these kids to bed? I'd say, sure. And you're going to think I'm making this up. You're going to think I'm exaggerating. This is the truth. You can ask my son, Josh, who works in my company. Here's what happened. I would walk out into the foyer of our house and I would scream in a very loud voice, in your beds on the count of 3 or no TV all day tomorrow. 1. And suddenly my kids would freeze like this. Then I'd say 2, and they go, oh my God. And they would run, and they would run as fast as they could. They'd run through the foyer, they'd run up the stairs, and I'd say 3, and they go, ah, and they would jump into their beds and get in their beds. Literally within 3 seconds, I accomplished something that didn't take my wife at the time a half an hour to do. And I would turn to her and say, there you go, and I go back to work. Now, why was I able to do that? Because I taught them cause and effect. I have never hit my children. I think that's insane. So to repeat myself the 3rd time, you can teach children cause and effect by not hitting them. There are things you can do that are very humane, that are very nice, to show them when you do bad things on purpose, not an accident, but when you do bad things on purpose, something bad will happen to you, because that's how the real world works when you become an adult. When you become an adult and you do something bad or do something stupid, bad things are going to happen to you. And if you're not trained in how cause and effect works, you're going to have all kinds of problems as an adult. Item number 5, and this is something a lot of men, especially alpha males, have trouble with. Your second duty to your children when they are small, under the age of 18, is to teach them unconditional love. Now that means that they know you love them and you care for them and you're a part of their life and you don't resent them no matter what choices they make in their life, even if you completely disagree with them. So the alpha male 1.0 father points at his son and says, "You're going to college, goddammit. And after you go to college, you're going to be a dentist." And if the son says, "Well, I don't want to go to college," or "I want to be a drummer in a band," the alpha male 1.0 father loses his shit and screams at his son, and now his son thinks that his dad doesn't love him unconditionally. Very, very bad. This causes all kinds of psychic damage in children, both little boys and little girls. You need to demonstrate to your children that, hey, I love you no matter what. You're my son. You're my daughter. You can make any decisions you want in your life, and I may not agree with them, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't change a thing between you and me and between the love I have for you as my son or my daughter. If they go off and make decisions in your life that you don't like, now I'm not talking about bad things they do. If they do something bad and they're under the age of 18, you have to punish them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about decisions they make with their life. If you're a big jock guy and your son is a little nerdy kid who likes to play video games, you need to accept that. If you want a really girly girl little daughter and your daughter turns out to be some kind of tomboy who hates wearing dresses, you need to accept that. If one of your kids grows up to be gay, oh my God, you need to accept that. I'll give you some examples from my life. Both my kids, either now or have been for many years, monogamous. I'm completely opposed to monogamy and my kids are well aware of this. Doesn't matter. My son was monogamous for years. He isn't now, but he was for years. Didn't matter. That's fine. It's his decision. My daughter is monogamous now and has been for a long time. Doesn't matter. Here's another one. My son went to college. I'm completely opposed to college, but he went to college. Matter of fact, I had people in my audience back when my son was going to college many years ago. He's like, "Wait a minute, you're against college. Why did your son go to college?" Because my son was an adult. He's over 18. He can make his own decisions. He's not my robot. He's his own man, and I love him no matter what decisions he makes as an adult, even if I personally disagree with them. There are various little things that my children as adults now, both my kids are adults, my son is 30 and my daughter's 23. There are various little things they do that I disagree with. It doesn't matter. I love them unconditionally. They know that. They've always known that because I don't want to create psychic damage and think, oh, my dad doesn't love me because I made this decision in my life. That's a hard one, like I said, for men, especially strong men, especially alpha males, especially tough guys. We as men want our children to do what we want them to do, and if they don't do it, we get all pissed off, both when they're little kids, when they're teenagers, and when they're adults. Religion is another one. If you have a strong religion and the kids don't want any part of it, you need to suck that up, bro, and let them do that. Or the reverse. If you're an atheist and they become really religious, that's their decision. Sorry. Now, you have to agree with these decisions, but you have to still love your children, and they have to know you still love them. Now, last point on this. These two things work in conjunction. If you have unconditional love and you've trained them in cause and effect, they're going to be very happy adults. If you have unconditional love and you don't train them on cause and effect, they're going to grow up to be little spoiled brats and little lazy bastards like the millennials and Gen Z, because that is how those generations were raised, and that's how women raise children. Women show all this love but never punish. That's a problem. If you teach them cause and effect and you're very aggressive about punishing them when they do wrong things, but then you turn right around like an alpha male 1.0 and scream and lecture at them on how they need to live their life and being pissed off when they don't, that's also a problem. You need to do both of these things at the same time to maximize your odds that your kids turn out well. And even then, I should say this to wrap up this video, there's no guarantee. You can do everything right as a parent and your kids can still turn out to be assholes. Now, thankfully, my kids didn't. My kids are fantastic. Love them to death. They're great. I'm very proud of both of them. But just be aware, this goes back to the original one of having the minimum amount of kids, only have kids who really want them, because you may roll the dice and get snake eyes. You may roll the dice and get a kid that has mental problems, learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and all kinds of good stuff like that. And that's may or may not be outside the 2% rule depending on what you're doing. By the way, if you like content like this, I do 2 to 3 videos per week on this channel regarding these topics of location-dependent income, dating multiple women, and building a lifestyle of maximum masculine freedom. If you like this kind of stuff, you can subscribe to this channel, click the notification bell, leave a comment on this video, and or put a like on this video. And if you'd like to watch a video on why it doesn't matter what a woman brings to the table when you're looking at someone to settle down with, you should watch that video right here, and I'll see you in that video.